5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we live. No one heard that click.
You want me to do it over? Let me do it. I'll do it over. Let's do it over. Was that good enough?
That was a snap.
Aggressively.
Still didn't hear it.
Welcome back to Something Nice, Season 2, Episode 6. We back with a very special.
And you've treated yourself to something nice.
Yeah, thank you for treating yourself to something nice. Agreed.
Oh, can't forget it.
The Something Nice that we've got on our show today is Uche. Uche, say hi to everyone.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, this is an episode again that we've been waiting to do for a while. So I am genuinely excited to get into this. Akil, do you want to introduce today's episode?
Sure. Yeah, today we're gonna talk about something very special, of course, the Black woman. So we must of course have a very important Black woman as a guest today too. So, it's just gonna be a fun one today, and yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about things that genuinely just encompass the all-round Black female experience. And just anything and everything that honestly just comes up and pops into our head as we go on this little journey of ours. So fasten your seatbelts, everybody. Okay, no, I'm kidding. Let's get into this. But yeah, firstly, Uche, I just want to start off by saying what does it mean to you being a Black female? What does that mean?
I guess first of all, hello again. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I don't know, right now when I think of a Black woman, I feel joy, I feel pride, I feel excited, I feel lively. I just feel a lot of positive emotions when I think about a Black woman.
Yeah, that is solid. That's really beautiful. Do you feel like the space to be a Black woman has shifted over the time you growing up?
Yeah, I think one of the most beautiful things about being a Black woman is that everybody's journey and experience is different in terms of acceptance and self-love. So for me, I when I was younger, I came from a more homogeneous society, right, where I didn't know anything other than Black.
Yeah.
And to the US was a very almost culture shock, oh, where is everybody? Where is everybody? What's going on? And then kind of settling into the fact that I'm no longer, a normality, and then being around young little kids and realizing that you're not getting chosen when guys are doing cute stuff or for Valentine's Day and things of that nature. So I went through all of that, and then in high school I had to go through a time where I started wearing my hair naturally. And that was such a scary thing for me because at that point, my hair had always been in, braids. So I didn't really even know what my hair looked like. And then coming to accept that and learning to love myself through that way. And then getting to college and realizing that I wasn't ugly. I was just around a lot of white people all the time. And, all the things that come with just, that journey to yourself. And, so yeah, I would say there has been a shift, and I think that as I grow, it'll just continue evolving into whatever my settings and surroundings, make it to be.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. That's cool. There's something that you already said that I actually want to talk about because I think Akil's mentioned this as well before with his dreads, growing up with his dreads, and how his like in school and stuff, that like he was not allowed to dread his hair. Like he would not allowed to be wear his hair out in an afro. Like he couldn't. It had to be like clean cut, shaven. Like, but even like, what is clean? Like what clean to whose standards, to whose perspective? And I think that's a huge part of it, right? Like, because you're repressing a huge part of what makes you you and what gives you confidence to exuberate who you are. When you look in that mirror and you see your natural hair in its natural state and are able to still love yourself and have that confidence around loving yourself, it's a completely different way that you carry yourself in society after that. And that space has never been given to Black women in particular, which makes it even more difficult for a Black woman to fully come to terms with who she is as a person. Like in school and stuff growing up, did you guys have like really weird ass rules, like you could not have your hair out in an afro, like dreads were considered not like decent for public, like was that a thing?
In my school, I don't think it was like overtly a thing, but I think that the way my parents raised me, I guess, like, I don't know how to put this, but I guess in such a way, like they just automatically did like the more conservative thing for me in order to, like just protect me and save me from all that hassle, right?
Yeah.
So when I first moved to the US, I was going to a private Christian school. And so my hair was just always plaited in some way. Part of that was because my mom hated doing my hair because like my hair is really tough. And so she hated doing my hair. And then part of that was just like also convenience of, knowing that like she wouldn't have to do my hair in the morning or whatever. And then in my high school experience, I think it was pretty mild. Like I also went to a predominantly Black high school even. So like, what were they going to do at that point? Like, yeah. Right. So I had it easy, I think, growing up in terms of like my parents and, the way I wanted to look.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's really cool. And I like, because I think a lot of people, because in Auckland specifically, I know the like in general, the Black population and then the Black population that stems from Africa, it's really like minute. Like I don't even think, I think there's like just over 2,000 Africans maybe in the whole of New Zealand, and it's probably concentrated in two like big regions. Mm-hmm. And naturally a lot of them end up trying to assimilate for the various stories that they have left their so-called homes. Mm-hmm. And somehow we, like, society has said the process of assimilation means the process of trying to look white. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not just trying to look white in the sense of like you're bleaching your skin, trying to become lighter, but also like in your appearance of the way you maintain your hair, the way you dress, the way you speak, the way you eat your food, like the most basic things. And it's kind of frustrating at times because you lose a huge part of your identity, right? Like you're not in touch with some of the most fundamental aspects of what makes you you and what differentiates you from the average person walking on the street. Mm-hmm. So no, but that's interesting that like it's kind of heartwarming to know that you actually grew up in an environment where that wasn't the case, because it's unfair. I feel like it's so unfair on the little young girls who don't see themselves in, they don't see representation. That's the other thing. Like representation for the Black female community in the US, has it progressed? Like, do you feel, because I know, by the way, for those listening, Uche is trying to break through into the film industry in the US.
Oh my
God. And that breakthrough, like being a Black woman, do you think it makes it harder?
Yes, for sure. I think it was in 2016 when UCLA released their like diversity report or whatever around the same time as like the Me Too movement was taking up in Hollywood. I would say like that point was definitely the shifting point in terms of like representation in the film industry and media, or just like in general. Like now it was a cool thing to like have a Black woman in front of your camera and like on the cover of your magazine, etc. But that representation for Black women came at the hands of people like Zendaya, Yara Shahidi, Storm Reed, you know, like very like mixed Black women or like racially ambiguous Black women. Right. So then there was work to be done there. Like not all of a sudden, like we're not representing like the totality of Black women. We're representing a very like whitewashed, like slave masters slept with the slave version of a white woman. So like there's like a bunch of like historical context that goes into that. And so I think now, like, of course, that was pointed out by people like Viola Davis, Lupita Nyong'o, like the whole of them, Angela Bassett. And that's when we started seeing, you know, okay, like now there's darker skinned women in front of the camera or in just media in general. But then there's also another side to think about women in media behind the camera and that are not as seen, and like how those affects like the stories and the narratives and the commercials and advertisements that we're seeing on screen too. So I think in a lot of ways, like it's been amazing to just like watch the work that's being done, but also like there's just so much work to be done in terms of representation. I think also, sorry if I'm like talking a lot. But I think also like the recent Black Lives Matter movement this summer, like not all of a sudden, I was discussing this with a friend, but not all of a sudden being Black or participating in Black culture, or even like the caricature of like a Black woman with the nails and the hair and the edges and the makeup, is not all of a sudden cool, right? Because not if you're not participating in Black culture in some way, shape, or form, or you're not like overtly showing, you know, that you are cultured, you know, like it's no longer cool. Like now all of a sudden, like Blackness and the idea of like what makes up being Black is cool. So it's interesting to see that like there's representation in that way, but like people are not then taking it a step further and like actually applying it to real life outside of their own personal like enjoyment. But yeah, I think it's cool to watch, but I still believe like there's just so much work to be done too.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I think it's interesting how you said that. Firstly, let me just say, you could talk as long as you want, bro. You could talk 10 minutes straight if you want right now. This episode is up. You can talk how long ever you feel like talking. But yeah, I think that's interesting what you said, like with the representation, because I don't know, like I feel like it's good, but like the same way how you said that, like there's like almost like now like a standard of what it is to be Black. Do you feel like is, I don't know, limiting in some way, as in if you're not like this version of what it means to be Black, like, you know, you can't be a Black person, but you know there's a full spectrum of what it means to be a Black person. Not every Black person has to act the same way, or you know, they can be two completely opposite personalities, opposite mannerism, opposite everything, but that doesn't make you any less of a Black person in any way. So I think it is interesting how you said like how that representation could be, I don't know, dangerous in some way, in like the way how people take it in and I don't know, apply it as well, because it the same way how it shows more perspectives, it could be limiting in that way. I don't know. Do you feel like now it has become, I don't know, in some ways easier to be a Black woman, like since like you've grown up to now, like in the way how like you're just treated or represented in society?
It's really interesting you ask that, because, you know, like if I were to ask somebody to like physically describe a Black woman, you know, they would probably say, you know, smaller in the chest, tiny waist, and then like fat ass, you know, like basically like
Out.
Megan Thee Stallion, like, you know, like that body, or Megan Thee Stallion was not the best example, but like,
No, but still,
like that sexiness, like Chloe from
yeah.
Chloe and Halle, like that, you know, like that sexiness, Beyonce, like, um, and that's really what's like portrayed like in the media right now. It's like that version of like blackness and
Mhm.
what people think when they see a black woman. But then I think of on the opposite spectrum from like Beyonce, Chloe, Megan, I think of someone like Rico Nasty and how she's like not what people would typically think about when they think about a black woman, but like she still like exists in her own like platform in her own vein, and that speaks to so many black women, even if we don't necessarily like see ourselves in that person, but what we do see is just like the total acceptance of like who they are.
Mhm.
um so I think like it's helpful in that sense, right, that we have people that we can look to in terms of like how we feel about ourselves. But I think in a more like physical sense, in terms of like when we think about like what's considered attractive and whatnot these days, I think like it's a little bit harder, because I think like then black women and also women in general like feel like they have to change who they are so that they can fit the totality of like whatever womanhood means to them, if that makes sense. I don't know if that like was making sense, but
Yeah, no, that definitely does make sense to me. Yeah. Um, no, that totally makes sense. You mentioned earlier on, you mentioned how like um everybody wants to partake in black culture now. And more than that, I feel like the standards of beauty are shifting towards naturally what a black woman is. So you've got lots of other people from various other races and cultures now trying to look more and more like what a black woman would look like, you know, whether it's you're right, the characteristics of the shape of the body, or like why do we have an extensive focus on everybody trying to work on their ass all of a sudden, like, you know, like things like that. Like I agree, like the standards are shifting, but the standards are shifting with characteristics taken from black women, but the narrative is still white.
mm-hmm.
And you know, like things like that, like I feel like they're not completely accommodating of the space that black women could take to actually push that narrative. Then like the narrative has always been theirs, like they haven't changed anything. Like when was the last time you saw a black woman coming forward to like change the way that they have been living their life? But it's more the other way around, right? And in a way it ends up becoming really performative, like from the other end, because I feel like sometimes for the sake of cultural assimilation and cultural learning, we end up like picking the easiest or like the most popularized aspects of a certain way of life, and we like over exoticize it and over just like give it too much, like how do I put it, you know, like we just like put it on us on the most extreme spectrum, and that's the only thing we end up taking. Like we were not looking at the layers underneath it, we just see the surface and we're like, okay, we grab the surface and we're going to walk with it. And how do you think we can move past that kind of performative initiative from a lot of other people and like mainstream media in general? Like how do you think we can move past it?
You know, honestly, I think that as you know, because the people that are pushing, you know, the current um black woman ideology, let's call it,
Mm-hmm.
um you know, they're like middle class white people, you know, that like rap music and smoke weed with their friends in the suburbs. Like, you know, like that's the class that's like pushing this media. Like that's TikTok and like Gen Zers,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? So I think they're going to push it and push it, right? But I think in a way it gives Black people power in that, okay, now that we are loved so much, you
Mm.
know, as a whole, or even if it's just like this one idea or one viewpoint of what Black people are, right? Now that gives us more time to like learn that love ourselves, right? Because I think like before it's hard in a society that also hates you and doesn't want to see you. It's even harder than to then, you know, find this space to like love yourself.
Yeah.
So I think once Black people are like afforded the time and the opportunity to do so, I think like as a whole, we will start realizing that there are so many like different facets of Black, what it means to be Black.
Yeah.
And I think given that opportunity and time to like, while everyone is still loving on us and, you know, taking from our culture, like you're then able to take a step back and feel like, yeah, like there are a lot of things that I should love about myself,
Mhm.
even if it's not necessarily what's being portrayed in the media.
Yeah.
And I think that there will be you'll see more people like coming out as like just who they are and loving that person and like letting that person be seen. So
Yeah. 100%. I really like that response. Yeah, you're right. Cause like, and I've actually said this to Akko before, like performativeness, I hate it. Like I think it's obviously like it's like tokenizing. That's the word I was looking for. It's tokenizing, you know, like,
yeah.
but in a way it can be good because you're right, like you are tokenizing aspects of a particular way of life that were never even accepted before, you know, that were never even given the space to exist. And now all of a sudden the space to exist becomes this collective space where everybody wants to exist in that light, you know. And there are certain positives that can be taken from it. And when things start to shift to a more mainstream like paradigm, like you're able to sort of, you're right, like the people who actually have always been part of that paradigm can actually take a step back and say, actually, I can be me, I can be loved by not just me but the people around me. And more people want to be like me. Like I am setting the bar. Like I am not trying to achieve what the bar has already been set to. I've become the bar. Like and that in itself can be very empowering if like done in the right space and the right light with the right respect. um but yeah, no, I like your response. I like that. That's really interesting.
I think that's also interesting. I think the one problem is that like with that same thing, like a lot of aspects of our culture or like just like black culture in general, like I don't think this is even specific to the US, but you know, a lot of things are cool because one is edgy and you know is different, but it's also like you know real people's lives at the end of the day. You know, like people are actually going through like these stuff that you know other people might be enjoying but don't actually have to go through. And that happening, people like to highlight all the negative parts, you know, and kind of promote that and try to keep that as the you know as the main thing, you know, like all these negative parts and like all this negativity. So the thing is, I think we have the power because everyone wants your attention, but now it's just like do you use that platform sorry, yeah, do you use that platform to try to you know change your message and change the way how you're seen and perceived in the public? I think the problem with that is now there aren't enough people doing it, so if someone is to like make a drastic shift, people might just stop, you know, like listening with them, stop fucking with them, and like you know stop paying attention to them. So is I don't know, it's kind of hard because they kind of have to upkeep this image, but I don't know, it's a cycle that needs to be broken at the same time. So I definitely think the power is still with those, you know, the ones that people are looking at, you know, because at the end of the day, people want to hear like, you know, their music, people want to see their art, people want to see them at the end of the day. So it's what they do with that power, I guess.
Oh, agreed. Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Like, yeah, that's very, very true. I wanted to talk to you, Uche, about so recently. Oh, this is a bit irritating when it happened, but I have a friend who doesn't necessarily sound the way Black people are meant to speak or meant to sound according to society. and she's like extremely well spoken. Like her vocab is like insane. Like I can't even half the words she says. I'm like dictionary googling it up. Like I don't know. Like she's just really, really well spoken, well read. Like, and it's really frustrating for her because a lot of the times, like she'll walk into a public sphere, and a lot of people will ask her why she's trying to sound white, and
Mhm.
the narrative of associating a well-educated, well-spoken Black woman to wanting to sound white is a narrative that somehow I feel like a lot of Black women are not able to escape. Like, how do we go about changing that? Like, just because you're well, well read and well spoken, and all of a sudden you choose to use big words in your vocab and the way you speak, um, there's automatically that association that a Black woman cannot sound like that, and that that's got to be like pretty fucking frustrating, right?
Mhm. Um, well, first of all, like I just want Black people everywhere to be free from the shackles of speaking proper English is talking white. Like,
Yeah.
just let it go.
Yeah.
Like, release it. You know, it's so funny because Black people talk the way they do because they were segregated from society, from their own society, from their own home. Yeah. So like for us to even like come and be in a like a country that was even like made for us really, and then be saying that, oh,
I
like
know.
talking white, like, you know, like it doesn't even make sense in my mind, right? Like why it is why is it an argument that people are like trying to make, right? Like people talk the way they talk because of their environment.
Yeah.
And also I feel like it completely like it's almost like insulting to the skill and the art of code switching and being able to talk differently based on the environment that you're in. Because I can tell you the way that I talk, like at school or like on like in a setting like this versus the way I talk like with my friends, maybe with Akil versus the way I talk like with other Nigerians or Africans in general. Like it's different.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much beauty in that. And so like when people try to then, you know, make it seem like being able to fit your environment and do what you need to do to like be heard and whatever, like I feel like it's insulting to like the spectrum of Blackness and Black experiences and how those, you know, come out in such overt ways, such as the way that we speak. Um, that's like my long, like artistic answer. Like my more like realistic answer, yeah, is that I like I just feel like there's a level of like shame, you know, that comes with when somebody says, oh, like you're talking white, right? Like I feel like the pressures of like racism and segregation and the way that those have affected the way that Black people are able to see and relate to themselves, right? Like they almost feel, I think when they make when comments like, oh, why are you talking white, like when those comments are made, sometimes they're coming from a place of like that person's like feeling like you're robbing them of, you know, like something that's distinguished to them and to the culture, and like why are you trying to like fit in, you know, with these people that don't even really like you or love you the way that you should be liked or loved.
Mhm.
um, so I think a lot of times there needs to be patience within like when people are reacting to that and kind of understanding like where that comes from. um, but then on the other spectrum, I find that sometimes like people use like, I don't talk white, I'm talking proper English, like as an excuse, um, and almost as like a symptom of like being like hotepi, if you guys know that term.
Mhm.
Um, right. And so there's definitely people that kind of use like that excuse in that way. So I think a lot of our reaction to like that idea of that terminology is just like based on the situations that you're in and based on like the person that you're speaking to and like kind of what you know about them and their background.
Mm.
Yeah, nah, I think it's interesting you say that for sure. Because I think in the same like way, like is a double-edged sword because I feel like a lot of people like and also like on one end, right, they might refer to like talking proper English as being white or whatever. But then some people might switch around and then use it the other way around where they say like, okay, if you can't talk proper English now you're ghetto, like like you're stupid, but it's really more based on environment and in the same way how it might not be appropriate to use slang in an official setting. You're not going to be using like, dictionary words and like
Mhm.
formal speaking when you're talking with your friends. And even for white people, when they're talking at home with their family, like if they're saying G golly or whatever, like whatever funny shit they like, that's not how they talk to their business partners, So that's still
Mhm.
code switching in its own way, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like people need to be very conscious in like, what it is, like what side it is they're trying to because I don't know, it might be rooted in something on either side, either like not feeling black enough or feeling like as being black to be ghetto or whatever, so it's just interesting to see like, how people use that and like you could use it dangerously on both sides. So I don't know how exactly that's something you get over, but it's just something to be aware of.
Mm.
Something that I thought of, like when you said that you use like the example of like, you're not gonna be, talking slang in like the business room or whatever. But like I'm thinking about, I don't know if this is just like maybe something that I just think about personally, but I'm thinking about how being in places of power like affords you the ability to change the culture within like the place that you're working. Yeah. So like if somebody like Akil was to like suddenly become like the CEO of Google, bruh, like everything would be so lax and chill because like that's the vibe and that's like the way that he works, right? And so like I think like while at the same time like typically we won't be like talking slang and like just like chilling like in the boardroom, right? But I feel like what if Akil was to get there, like what if Akil was somehow to like reach that position of power, like then what would happen and how could like he affect that change and that norm within like that space.
Yeah. I mean, it's bound to
Yeah,
happen.
I don't mean to cut you off, but yo, Google, if you see this, hit me up. We can work because it's trying to get that Google check. Oh, don't play with me. I'm trying to get that Google check.
Surely they
Like
can
it's
make
fun.
a Google design with the something nice colors. You know when you log onto Google and they change the logo of Google to match whatever, whatever.
Come on, Google, hit us up.
um,
But yeah, nah, that's true though. Like in terms of with who's in power could really affect, what it is the culture of the environment is too. So
mm,
yeah, I never really thought about it like that before. That's true.
mhm. I mean, because it's at the end of the day, it's who's setting the tone, right? Like, um, if somebody in a place of power was to be setting the tone of inclusivity and expression of whatever, and like, yeah, like people forget how much of the scene the person sitting at the top actually dictates and runs. Like, um yeah, it really comes down to tolerance and inclusivity, and like when setting the tone, I don't think a lot of the times people in places of power are mindful for how broad their tone needs to be. um
Mhm.
but it'll be interesting to see, because I definitely feel like the shift in, like, I feel like last year was a big, like, everybody like kind of woke up a little bit to actually being slightly aware of the fact that things are not the way things should be. And everybody was trying to be a bit more vocal And when I say everyone, obviously not everyone was like this, but a significantly larger portion of people were all of a sudden open to conversations that they may have not been open to last year. But this brings me to my next point. I feel like a lot of social justice movements around the world seemingly do not, rather than exclude, I would like to say seemingly do not include the Black woman struggle. Like even Black Lives Matter, and it's not like I'm picking on Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter is a movement that started like 2013, 2012, around that time, and it's been going on for a while. And then the last year's spark of protests were because of George Floyd, of course, and that created a wave of things that happened. But then I look at what happened to Breonna Taylor, and I feel like why was that reciprocation not there for that woman as well, And hello.
Easier is it to me?
Hello.
Was that you, Rose?
I froze.
Yeah. Yeah.
My internet connection. Oh damn. Okay, did you guys hear what I said?
I feel like I kind of knew where you were going, but if you could repeat just so.
Okay. Major thing I was talking about is how social justice movements seemingly don't include the Black woman experience. And it just like the sort of response that BLM got for George Floyd and the way the world seemed to come forward to unite for a Black man, Breonna Taylor being a Black woman didn't get that. And I like, that's the thing. And not when I say social justice movements, it's easy to talk about Black Lives Matter because that's the most major recent one that I can think of that has just happened. But like even back in the day when the first wave of the feminist movement started, it didn't include people of color, but more than people of color, it didn't include the Black female experience, the Black female struggle of what it means to be a feminist in their own right. And even getting voting rights back in the day for like women, it did not include the Black woman until much later on. So there seems to be a pattern of seemingly not including the Black woman when it comes to these social justice movements. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I do feel that way. And not even if I didn't feel that way, that's a reality.
It is.
And like it, first of all, Black women, they have to deal with race. So first of all, you're born and you're Black. So you're already doomed. And then you're born and you're Black and you're a woman. So now you have to deal with like the patriarchy, right? So like, something like the, George Floyd setting off, another like civil rights era, if you want to call it. That doesn't surprise me one bit. Because he's a man, right? And so you see obviously patriarchy and like patriarchal society and how they view women. You see that, in the way news is portrayed. Like you look at somebody like, let's not talk about Black people, let's talk about, white people, and let's talk about Ted Bundy and the way like he was a serial killer, but yet he's almost glorified and like sexualized.
Movie. There's a Netflix movie about this man. Like, come on, like stop.
Right. And it's not even then about like the woman who lost their lives to this terrible human being. It becomes about like the charisma and the class and the friendliness of a serial killer, right?
Rapist, yeah, like get out of here.
So it's like, it's not a surprise to me at all. But it's so funny. I was telling Akil just before like I joined this call, like I was in an event for Malcolm X because today's the anniversary of his assassination. And so, I was speaking, the conference was held by like two Black women, both professors. And I asked them, like something like I was expressing frustration because I feel like the Black movement, whether it's in the US or worldwide, it's like, it's just not having enough speed for me personally. Like there's not enough punch, there's not enough like action going on. I feel like everything is so slow. And so I was expressing frustration, and she said like, there's something to be said about the decentralization of the movement and um, almost having, and she talked about something called like the invisibility factor. So when you look like at the 50s and 60s and the Black civil rights movement in America, most of that was run by Black women. Like Black women are the brains behind all these things that are happening within society.
Mm-hmm.
Black Lives Matter as a movement was started by two Black women,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like, I think things are this way is because like Black women are not that we're comfortable, but we know our role and our place within like the backgrounds, and we know we're used to, you know, doing things and maybe not getting recognition, right? Like we've come to like in some ways just kind of accept that as part of like what it means to be a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you're not seen doesn't like mean that you're not affecting change. So even though like, you know, like in the media, something like as sad as like Breonna Taylor and stuff, like we didn't go as hard for her. Like people did not come up and step up to her in the way that they should have, in the way that they did for George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that it's not necessarily surprising to me, and like it's frustrating that like I personally like I maybe this is a symptom of being a Black woman. Like, you know, I kind of see it and I move on, and it's like, yeah, like what did I expect? Like that's, you know, like that's like it wouldn't have gone any other way.
Mm.
And I recognize, you know, like in saying that, like that's not necessarily like a good thing, but I think that at least I and many Black women as well, I would say, have almost just come to be like passive and not even like recognize that people are not standing up for us or defending us or representing us or even just hearing us out like in the way that they should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it angers me that Black women are probably the most disrespected.
Oh my god, bro, you literally took the words out of, that was gonna be my next sentence. I swear to you, that was gonna be my next sentence.
Like how do you know, like fundamentally, biologically, in terms of DNA, the Black woman's the only woman that can give birth to every single fucking race in the world. The only, like that's the only possibility, and we have the audacity to disrespect basically the giver of all life, in my opinion. Like how did we come to that? Like that is messed up. It is so ridiculous. But okay, go ahead, Akil.
No, go ahead, you go ahead, you go ahead.
No, what were you gonna say?
I feel like you've been so quiet. We want to hear from you.
Women, when women are talking, I'm here to speak. I'm here to not to speak, to listen. I'm here to listen, to hear what you'll have to say, and I'll add my 2 cents at the end. You know what I'm saying? Because any day, like I could come here and I could talk, I could say whatever. But I'm not a woman. I'm not going through this experience, so I much rather listen in this situation.
But I really want to hear your perspective as a Black man, because
Okay.
like the relationship between Black men and Black women, that's something that also needs to be discussed. You know, like how go ahead.
Yeah, I'll definitely say I agree that Black women are the most disrespected and underlooked people for the most part in society, like in most societies, and is mostly simply for the fact that they're Black and a woman. So as Uche did point out earlier, I feel like a lot of people, especially men, might not understand or agree with that statement, but I don't know. I don't know how to break it down for them, but it's a lot of layers to break down. And I'll just say, I don't know. In a lot of ways, you just see it everywhere. I would say, like, to me is like kind of just in front of my eyes. Like you just see it everywhere, especially because even if you just take away the fact that they're, Black, like, just being a woman in so many ways, especially being from Trinidad or whatever, like recently in the news, like there's a lot of stuff that women have to account for or take into consideration that men just overlook. That's not that's not something that we have to worry about in our day-to-day lives. And I guess just because we're not in that situation, for a lot of people, they can't really see outside of their experience and what it is they're going through. So they can't even understand sometimes what they might be putting other people through. And then now that the fact that you're black on top of this, there's just a whole nother layer of just one, how you're perceived by other people, and two, how you perceive yourself. Because I feel like a big problem we have is, just as black people, we've been taught to hate ourselves for so long. That is why naturally, I would say a big reason why the black woman is one of the most disrespect people, because we don't even, for a lot of the part, like, we don't even want to look out for our own people. Because more than just looking out for our own women, we don't even want to look out for ourselves. So it will make sense naturally why we just look like disrespect, or like put these like women or whatever to the side. But yeah, I don't really know where I was going with this. I was just speaking off the top of my head, but these are just some stuff I notice as a black man just living my life, going through the matrix.
Going through the matrix.
But yeah, I don't know how exactly we could get people, because to me I feel like a big part of the problem is, like, people don't even understand the situation. Like, and people might just understand, imagine there are white people that don't understand that black people have it harder than them. And there are men that don't understand that women have to go through a lot of struggles and a lot of pain that they literally just don't even have to think about at any point in their life. And it's like, how do you get people to open their eyes to this an experience that they're not going through, or will never have to go through? You could basically live your life oblivious to these facts.
Mm. How do you suppose you can go about bettering the way black men stand up and treat black women? Like that dynamic of a relationship, how do you suppose it can be changed? Because in a way,
um
I'll tell you this, from my perspective, sometimes I think the reason why the world thinks they have such a big right, or they can freely just disrespect black women, is because the tone is somehow set by the black man when it comes to disrespecting black women. And so it's like, oh, but like a black man's disrespecting white woman, I mean black woman, what do you expect from the rest of the world, kind of deal. Like that's a question a lot of people ask. So how do we go about changing that dynamic, changing the way black men look after, or even just hear out and respect their black woman? How do we go about that?
Can I like say something? Like, I'm a history minor, so I feel like, I don't know, the history in me is coming out. But I think that's such an interesting question, because like the history behind like this treatment of like how black women treat black women is because, like, during slavery, um at least in the context of America, and then we can like maybe broaden it later on. But during slavery, like slave masters had complete control over like black women or whatever. And so oftentimes like they would rape black women, right? And then take them away from their families, separate them physically by, maybe selling the woman's husband to a different slave owner, right? And so then there's this narrative among black men in America specifically that like, I cannot get attached, like I cannot be the caretaker for this woman, because I never know like when I will, it's not gonna last. Like we're gonna be torn away, I'll be killed, she'll move. Like there were so many different factors, and like that's why we get here today with like the stereotype of like, oh, like single parent households and the black woman raising her children, and like my dad's not in my life and stuff, and like so much of that was rooted in like the evilness and in the racism of like the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. So I just think that like it's important for people to realize that this isn't the way Black men treat Black women isn't because they are Black men, but it is a symptom of being Black men in society that hated them. So
Yeah. Oh,
I
that's
just
a really good way you put it. It's a symptom of being Black men in a society that hated them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna bounce on that real quick. But yeah, I think it's interesting that you say that because what I was gonna say is what was I gonna say? Yeah, but what I was gonna say is I think that a big problem in it too is that as well as not necessarily respecting Black women, I feel like a root of it is because the Black man doesn't necessarily respect themselves, and
Mhm.
a lot of this just a lot of self-hate like within the Black community, because I don't think necessarily that people, men of other races, necessarily respect their women more, but I feel like they respect their race more. So in terms of they wouldn't allow a white man wouldn't allow a Black man to disrespect a white woman, even if he does not respect that white woman, just because is a white woman, and being white comes before anything else. And like, yeah, I feel like it's just a lot of not necessarily like the self-hate within the community, because I don't feel the Black man necessarily respects other Black men that much either. There's a lot of hatred and like violence towards each other in the community. So I feel like in finding to love ourselves, we would find to like love everyone else, because is like the disrespect of men towards women is like a serious problem. But there's also women disrespecting other women too. There's also mothers like creating abusive environments to raise their son in, to um not necessarily encourage, but to breed that type of behavior, like a certain type of you know um mindset or mentality. So yeah, I feel like it comes down to like a kind of self love, self hate situation, and resolving that, because we just don't respect each other a lot in general. So yeah, I don't.
but I mean, like what would, because I feel that Black women show a significantly larger amount of love and protection and care towards Black men than Black men show to us. So like what is it about like our collective experience as Black people that makes us the ones that are more likely to love and to care and to have those instincts of like, I have to protect you, this is my community, as opposed to like Black men? Like where's the disconnect for Black men?
I mean, I can't answer that question in a historically accurate way or anything, but I could just give you what I think about it. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But yeah, I definitely would say in general, Black women respect in a wholesale way Black men more than it is reciprocated. But in the same way, this is hard to exactly explain it as the way I'm thinking it, but yeah, I feel like that doesn't also, remove the fact that some of the ideologies, some of the mentalities that are passed on, some of these breeding environments that are created is not exclusively or specifically something that men do. And that's what I think my point is. I feel like a lot of these behaviors that are toxic towards women, it is a lot of the time a man doing to a woman, but women also do that to each other, because you can't say that the Black woman is always respectful to other Black women. Like, this is a thing that's true. Like, women take each other down. Like, there's also situations where, obviously is not as often, but there's abuse or neglect or that same environment, that same route that I'm trying to describe in women towards men. And these problems, I feel like, although they may be less often, they can't necessarily be ignored or, like, said that this is not a thing, because they all come from the same roots. And I feel like it's not necessarily just something that you could get, like, in changing all men, the situation is not going to be changed. Do you understand what I'm saying by that?
Yeah,
Because I'm seeing as an ideology, because you cannot say that black women do not disrespect each other, do not create environments that are disrespectful towards black men and
yes,
the black
I get
community
that.
in
I get
general. You
that.
can't say that it's just the black men toxic to the black community, and they are the, once you remove the men, everything is gonna be, peaches and cream.
No, that's not, I don't think that's what we're saying at all. I'm saying like there's a,
Oh, go on.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying what you're saying.
Uche, do you want to go ahead and explain a bit more of what you were trying to say, maybe?
yeah, sure. So like, yes, I see what you're saying, but I think maybe, I don't know if I misinterpreted what Varsha was like bringing up, but like I was thinking about it more in terms of like the general like disrespect and disregard for women, and not maybe necessarily like the causes of that, but like even if we take it outside of like the context of being black, like there we struggle with things like femicide or like, you know, sexual assault. And like that's happening in South, I believe it's like Venezuela right now, maybe, or and also in like South Africa.
Yeah.
So like why even in like, you know, the Philippines, like there's this trend where we see like men disrespecting and, you know, having such little regard for the lives of women. And so I think that's more how I like
Oh,
understood.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're not, I don't think my question was to discount the fact that, yes, women can be toxic to women. Like, for sure that dynamic exists and it's there. And that's a dynamic that we will discuss in a bit. But like, it was more of the disrespect women get from men. And because we're talking about the black female experience, I specify to say the disrespect that black men give to black women, like the space. And like Uche said, like historically, with the entire context of them not being able to attach a sense of affection and attach a sense of right to say that she is a part of me and she is a part of my family, like that kind of collective attachment, that right to have that attachment was necessarily, not necessarily, was taken away, and when that right's now been taken away, Uche is saying years later on now, we have seen that manifested and transformed into actions of black men not fully accommodating and respecting black women in the surroundings of familial relationships and just basic interactions. And that's the path that I was taking. I don't know if that makes sense to you, Akil.
From what you just described, I don't feel like we're seeing different things. Like, I feel like we're talking about the same thing. Like, honestly, like, that's how I feel like. I might just be talking about it from a different angle, but I don't feel like I like what you said. I agree with. Like, I feel like I was saying something similar. I just, what I'm trying to say
Go ahead and
is,
explain it again.
let
Sorry,
me
maybe
break
maybe
it down
we
in the
maybe
most.
we misunderstood.
Well, I feel like we understand each other.
That's crazy because
I
I
don't-
feel like you're saying something that's very like not
Yeah.
very different.
I understand exactly what y'all are saying, and I agree with it. So let me try to get y'all to understand what I'm saying.
Okay, go.
Yeah.
I don't feel like the problem is because they are black men, they are like this. And that is, in that one sentence, I feel like that explains everything I was just saying. because the problem is not because just because is a man that is black, that I don't feel like that is the problem there, I feel like that is a symptom, as you said, because I feel like the the real problem for me at least is the ideology, the behaviors that encourage people to have this perception of the black woman, because you could be a black man and respect black women to the utmost extent, and you could be a black man and have no regard for the black woman. And what makes the difference is the mindset, is the ideology, is how you perceive, yourself and your sisters. And that is simply what I feel like I was trying to say, and that's why I felt like it wasn't different to what y'all were saying.
Okay, it made more sense the second time around.
Mhm.
Like I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree. I see that. I agree with you, Akil. I don't think it's obviously not specific to black men, and
Mhm.
it's um
But more than that, I'm saying it's not because they are black men.
black men. Yeah,
You feel what
yeah.
I'm saying? It's not just because you're black when you're going to disrespect. You feel what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I feel that is what I want to clear up, because I feel like a lot of people, especially on social media, have this perception
Mm-hmm.
that just like that is the causation and the effect. It's like just because they're a black man, they're like this way. And as a
Yeah.
black man, like, you can't be anything outside. You cannot, because in that case, you're trying to say is something that cannot be changed. And I think it is something can be changed, because it's an ideology. It's how the way how people think, is the way how people,
Yeah,
look
that
out
makes a
for.
lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and
that's
like, sorry.
no, I was just gonna repeat the same thing again, so you could go ahead.
Yeah, like even like, but as we were speaking, like I'm thinking of like somebody like I'm just thinking about, first of all, like we're gonna talk like relationally, you know, black men and black women, like there's so much negativity surrounding, that, that relationship and that spectrum. And so I think from both sides of the spectrum, there's a possibility that like we almost like internalize like certain standards or certain acceptance, and like that affects the way that we see ourselves and the behaviors that we then give to others, and also the behaviors that we also like put up with. And so I think like, yeah, I would agree, like that definitely like plays a role into how we interact with each other. But also I don't think you can discount the fact that, just saying, like generally a lot of black women have really like negative experiences with black men, and that's almost like even just part of being a black woman. And I don't think that that is something that, I think that that's kind of where like the standardization that you were talking about, Akil, comes from, is that it's almost like a collective experience. And
Yeah.
so I think like the question then becomes like, why is it this way? Why is this something that almost every black woman can like relate to and understand and have said like they experienced?
Oh, you asking me this?
I mean, I would like,
Um,
it was just like my frame of, yeah, that's where my thoughts took me.
let me see.
You don't have to have an
So,
answer, just like, yeah.
Varsha, you want to say anything? Or
Do you want me to? Do you, I mean, you can
no, I'll just talk, bro. I'll just talk my shit. But
talk
yeah,
talk your shit
um,
then. Go.
yeah. Could you repeat the last part of the like that question or statement again?
Yeah.
Like just
So like you were talking about, like on Twitter, how it feels like, everyone is saying like you this disrespectful, rude, mean guys, like this is the black man, like this is how like we see black men. And so I was just saying like, why, like how come it is that almost every black woman you talk to can like relay you an experience like that? Like why is this almost a collective, like why is this almost just part of being a black woman?
yeah. So what I want to say to that is I feel like there's like a cycle going on, and I I can't say, you know, like, okay, I can't necessarily say who started this cycle, but I feel like there's a cycle of going on where there are these experiences, especially like, let's say in family relationships, like you know, like a lot of black men may leave their children, you know, leave a mother to grow up in a single, you know, single parent home, and that in itself creates like some tension or some kind of, you know, hatred in itself, right? And then now you have like a mother that will be growing up her kid, and obviously this is not the standard, but you have a lot of cases where there's a lot of animosity towards the dad or whatever that they might portray, or just on animosity to black men in general that they more portray on their child or their kid. And now you have like this cycle. Like, to me, I feel like it's a cycle where, you know, the kid is now growing up in this environment, and you know, is not to say like that's the mother's fault or anything like this, but yeah, that's really and truly like this the best analogy I could give, where there is a cycle going on, and you know, it's just a lot of self-hatred, you know, being general, like generationally passed on in some sense. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense, and I would agree. I think it just goes back to you know, what I said about like slavery and how that affected you know, black people's ability to, you know, have a home and have a family life.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that comes out in different ways, and one of those ways is in like black women's anger at the fact, like, you know, like they have to be alone, like they don't get have a man or you know, the father of the children like in their life.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no doubt that there is an insane amount of generational trauma, but there's also they're like even further than that. There's no doubt that that generational trauma has never been dealt with, and like Akil then says, it gets replicated and manifested in these personas being created, where black men and black women think that they have to ascertain to a particular standard. Um, but this because intergenerational trauma is real, and I don't think enough people talk about it, um, to the extent where now we can even talk about healing. You know, um, how like with all this trauma, now that we've got this space where being black is considered, like everybody wants to take part in some form of black culture and associate to some form of um just, I guess, to a certain extent, a sense of inclusivity, or like people want to be seen, and more than that, like I think in the US, like, and around the world as well, this is obviously very generalized, but like they there's a slow movement to a space where there's more light given to black people, black women, black culture in general. And now that that space is slowly creating, I feel like the conversation of healing needs to start happening, because how does the cycle end otherwise, you know? um how does the cycle end if we're not going to address the problem, we're not going to address the generational trauma that's ingrained in you? And that's the thing, right? Like a lot of people in general also don't know about the trauma in their blood. They don't know about the trauma that they walk around and carry with them, and they don't understand why their actions end up being, they act in a certain way or they react in a certain way, because people don't just wake up one day and do things. Like this is built up for like generations to come. This is built up. The action has the path to set the action was long taken. It's not like a quick right turn. That's not how actions work, you know. And with this amount of trauma, the process of healing is not a quick process. It is a lengthy process. It is a lengthy conversation. And do you feel like that conversation has started, Uche?
The conversation of like healing,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it started at all. I think Black women are just not getting to a place where they are more comfortable and confident to express, like, you know, built up frustration and anger about their experiences with Black men.
Yeah.
And I think right now, I think a lot of Black men are just truly unable to like really have that understanding, that conversation, either have it or either even like comprehend, you know, what Black women are saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we're at now. Is like we like the conversation is just starting, and I think it's going to take a long time for the majority of Black men to really, you know, be able to understand and comprehend like what Black women are trying to relay to them. And then another part of that again is like the media, like kind of what we were talking about earlier with how like Black women are portrayed in the media. I think about somebody like, you know, like Tyler Perry and like the type of like media that he makes, where it's always a Black woman, like, you know, being pushed down and like being hurt, usually at the hands of Black men in their lives. And while this is like a narrative that's so strong within the community and it's true, we now need our media to kind of, you know, let that go, right? And like, let's kind of turn the conversation elsewhere. So I feel like it's starting, but, you know, I don't think we're at the point of like healing yet and reconciliation.
Fair. That's I agree with you 100%. I wanted to ask you the question to get a response that people would be able to understand. Personally, for you, Uche, do you think, like, what do you do to necessarily heal the wounds that society has given you? Because one, growing up, is it like, I think you've got the 3-star rating here. You're Black, you're a woman, and you're an immigrant. 3-star rating. So
yeah,
it's like the process of healing for you. How has it been? Like, if I may ask, of course.
yeah. You know, I don't even know if I'm an expert. Like I can't speak because I'm still healing. And like I just think it's something that you have to take day by day. You know, like I kind of described my experience moving to the US and growing and, you know, having to, you know, come to a place where I love myself. But that never really stops. Like I don't ever think that there's really like an ending point to that. But I think for me, I just realized, like, I would look at my mom and I'd be like, wow, like that is a woman that loves herself and knows who she is and like doesn't care what anybody has to say about it. So that, even though it's funny, because even though that was like my mother, like growing up, like I was so concerned about everyone else in the outside world and like how they perceived me and how I kind of internalized like their own perception of me. And so I think a huge part of my healing was like, you know, like doing a 180 and coming back to like myself and like where I came from and my family and like who raised me and like who are the people that like brought me into this world and like what's our history and like what's the history of like the larger people as a whole. And so I think that's like really where my journey started, is like, you know, looking at myself and, you know, finally rejecting like the negativity that comes with the eyes of the world and like trying to see myself through like, you know, like what do I look like to me and how can I then like share that with the world and take pride in that person. Yeah, so I think like that process like never really ends, and I think especially for Black people.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree.
What does the space of healing look like for you, Akil?
What's that?
What does your space of healing look like for you?
Healing. Shit. I don't know. Okay, I'm joking. But for me, I feel like healing really starts with yeah, it's really and truly just I don't want to sound like a broken record, but just self love and is actually figuring out like who you are and not what who people tell you are, and I feel like that's a big problem for a lot of people, just regardless of race, but especially for Black people. And a lot of people just like fall into the mentality that like okay, like like you have to be a certain type of way, like if people paint this picture of like what you are like, that is like what you're limited to. And for me it was really just figuring out like like now like I could be like whatever version of myself like I want to be. And give me 1 second real quick. Can we pause like for 1 second real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's really just figuring out who you want to be, and not being what other people tell you need to be, because I feel like that's a big issue for people. Also a big issue, I don't want to get into too much, is pride, and like letting go of your pride and your ego, and having to present yourself in a certain way to please or gain some type of social status from other people. But yeah, I feel like in the process of letting go of all those stuff, you really learn to love yourself. And the more you love yourself, the more you love other people. And as corny as it sounds, like it's true, because the more like you start caring about yourself, the more you want other people to be in the position that you are, like mentally and just spiritually and whatever. So that's what I feel like we really need to work on as a community, and as just like as a human species in general. Like I feel like in that process we would get rid of a lot of tension and just preconceptions that we hold other people to, because all these stuff, like they just teach us from a kid, and they just like tell you that like, you have to be this way from the time you're small. And it's just going through that process and realizing like who you really are, and not what they tell you have to be. So yeah, them bars for free, come on.
Yeah, that was
Tune
deep.
We'll leave it alone. Moment of silence to absorb.
in. So let's unpack that one.
I think it's important for us to also highlight here that the process of healing looks different for everybody. And even if you fall under the same, a similar sub collective, no, group, no, but like everybody's process of healing is different. For some people, it's coming to terms with their history, um, realizing where they come from, who they come from, what they come from, and how they have come from what they've come from. So, and for some people, the process of healing is, you know, looking forward into the future and rechanging how they feel about themselves now, and deciding what kind of life they want to walk into from now onwards. And um, more than that, like what color this light is and how it looks on them. And, like, but at the end of the day, the process of healing definitely starts from self-love, I think, like Akil said. Um, and I hope people listening actually take a moment to go back and listen to the entire episode, yes, of course, but also um, understand that like the stuff that we've discussed today is, of course, like from one particular perspective, even though we've tried our best to encompass different things that we can, and different types of people and different types of perspectives that may come from it. But at the end of the day, we've only been speaking from what Uche's experienced, what Akil's experienced, things that I've seen, and things that I can ask questions about to probe responses from them. Um, so this conversation is long. Like, this is not a one-time conversation, is what I'm trying to say. Um, but either way, shout out to Uche for doing this. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This was so fun. Like I was just thinking like, wow, I wish I could do this every week. Like I'll come back whenever you ask me to.
Next season, we got you booked already.
Final remarks.
Final.
Yeah, let me give my final remarks. Black people, go to therapy, please. You know, don't feel like you're crazy. Don't feel like anyone's gonna judge you. You know, you can go let go all of that tension, you know, slowly break down them walls and, you know, just turn into the butterflies you are and get out of that cocoon because
Fly away.
they want us to be here. We're in this state because they want us to be in this state and they tell us we need to be in this state.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go free your mind, open your soul, and love yourself.
Hey, I just want to point out, Akil, I notice your hair is touching your shoulders. I just feel like that should be pointed out for the audience, bro. Congrats.
Day, you genuinely just made this day.
Accepting applications to do my locks. Hit me up.
But yeah, thank you, Uche, for coming on. I guess this is a wrap for this episode, but surely we'll see you very soon with a new episode. And Uche will be back. This is not the last you'll see of her. Oh yeah. So more conversation coming up with completely different topics all around. So stay tuned.
Next Black woman you see, tell her you love her.
100%. 100%.
Yes.
Okay. Bye.